says to him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Now this confuses me because either the today thing is wrong or the paradise thing is wrong. We know what happens to Jesus that day. He's hanging on a cross and he's dying. He's being tortured to death. And we know that what happens after he dies is that he's put in a tomb and he's dead for 3 days until he rises from the dead. There is no evidence in the narrative, in the story, that Jesus is anywhere near paradise until after the following Sunday. So what does the today mean? Or maybe it's that this criminal will be with him today, but paradise is different than we think. Paradise. The word paradise, as it appears here in the Gospel of Luke, in Greek is paradiso. There are only 3 places in the New Testament, in the whole Bible actually, where that word appears. And it turns out that it isn't really a biblical word, it's more of a pagan word. The word originally came from Persia. An idea that when the heroes die, they'll live in immortality in a lovely place where they get whatever it is they want and they're eternally happy and so forth. Well, obviously, that's not what's going on in this scene. They're not being eternally happy, they're being crucified. So, what is this paradise thing that Jesus speaks of? What is it he's promising this criminal who's hanging there with him? The criminal is unusual in some ways. There are 2 criminals hanging there. One on Jesus' right and one on Jesus' left. And one of them says to Jesus, "Be the Messiah. Come on, get me down off of this cross. Be a bigger bully than this crowd if you're the Messiah and the King of the Jews." So he's thinking as the world thinks. But the other criminal sees something different. He looks at Jesus and he looks at the other criminal and he says to him, "Don't you get it? We deserve to be punished. But this man has done nothing wrong." Now, there are only 2 people in that entire scene that get that. This criminal and Jesus. Everybody else looking on, the crowd, the Romans, the leaders, the priests, they're looking at Jesus and they are triumphant. They know that they have got the right guy and they've crucified the right man. They've caught their man. They're killing him and they feel good about it. And now it's time to just mock him and make fun of him because of his blasphemy. He deserves to be put down for his sin. They know that they're right. And so does the other criminal. He knows what's going on is that that the only solution is more bullying. But the criminal who turns to Jesus and says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom," sees something that nobody else except Jesus sees, and that is that Jesus is innocent and the crowd and everybody else is guilty. Everybody else is convinced that they're innocent and Jesus is guilty. And he sees that Jesus is innocent and everyone else is guilty. Now that is a very important insight. You know when the kids gather around the fat kid in the playground and they start making fun of him and picking on him and pushing him around, they feel good about themselves. They know they're better than he is because they're not fat and dumb like he is. So they can make fun of him and push him around, and it helps them be friends with each other. They know they're right when in fact they're not. You know, when the Southern crowd, back in those ugly days of lynching, you know, when they used to take a black man and string him up, they were all convinced they were doing the right thing. They were restoring order to their society, that they had caught the bad guy and they were giving him what he deserved. And they would even have a party as they committed this collective murder. They believed they were innocent, but they were wrong. They were guilty. The one who is able to see that the crowd is guilty and the one that the crowd is picking on is the one that is innocent, that is the one who sees the truth. And the one who sees the truth, what is it that Jesus says about seeing the truth? You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. When you're a Christian, You identify not with the crowd that crucified Jesus. You identify with Jesus who is crucified. That's who we are. We are the ones who are ruled by the crucified King. And we try to follow him, and we try to obey him, and we try to identify with what it means to be the one who is crucified, who is cast out by the crowd. And that is to see the truth. Now there's this business about paradise. How is it then that being nailed on a cross and recognizing that a crime is being committed against you, how is it that that is paradise? Well, it just might be if it means that you escape from the spell of the crowd and you begin to see the real truth of what is going on. However great your pain might be, there may be some kind of paradise in the freedom that comes from knowing the truth that nobody else sees. Suffering on a cross. What is suffering anyway? It's pain, surely. It's distress. But you know, there are ways to feel pain and distress that we don't think of as suffering. For example, when an athlete decides that he wants to run to the top of a mountain, he's going to be in discomfort, pain, and distress as he runs to the top of the mountain, but he doesn't so much think of that as suffering. He simply sees it as an obstacle to be overcome. In fact, the obstacle itself is what makes the goal worthwhile and meaningful. So he doesn't see it as suffering so much as simply something to struggle against, a challenge, something stimulating. So suffering isn't necessarily just pain and distress. In fact, this is what suffering is. Suffering is pain and distress that is experienced as punishment. If you don't experience it as punishment, you can endure the pain and distress much more readily without getting all this depressed and upset about it. You don't see it as suffering. Crystal told me about this I've never seen this TV show, but I understand there's one called Wife Swap. How many of you have seen the TV show Wife Swap?